So Lisa will unmute herself.
I am unmuted.
Excellent.
I am very, very grateful to be here with you all tonight, and I'm excited to be able to talk about my journey with my faith and my love for Jesus, because I don't ever really get to speak about Jesus in a public forum very much. I have in churches, and I have talked about it in interviews, but it is not something that I usually speak about because it's a private journey, and there's I don't want other people's opinions to come into to play. And so when I was preparing today, I usually do speeches really off the cuff, but I have grown and learned to write a little outline of some things. But that doesn't mean that I'm always going to follow the outline, because if I feel something really called in my heart, I'm just going to start talking about that. And I know that you want to hear about the Inspiration Cafe, but I saw that everybody in the emails got the story about the cafe, and so people know about the cafe, and I don't mind answering questions about the cafe, but the cafe is one section of the journey. And so I just want to be able to talk about different things. The other thing I want to talk about is my son Nick's here. He is laying here. He acquired a brain injury in 2015. So I'm his full-time caregiver. So at any moment I might pop up, but you will see Nick. In fact, I'm going to show you Nick right now, just so you know he's here with us. And he's in bed. There's Mr. Nick. It's kind of dark, but that's Nick right there. And that's everyone, Nick. They're all going to listen to the story today. So, and then here's this beautiful quote that I have that's on the wall that I've had. This was my office before Nick's room. This was Nick's room, and it says, "Love the earth and the sun and the animals, despise riches, give alms to everyone that asks, stand up for the stupid and crazy, devote your income and labor to others, and your very flesh shall be a great poem." That is some poetry from Walt Whitman. So that is a good way to start. So the one thing I wrote down was that my walk, my spiritual time with Jesus says, my walk with Jesus has been messy and perfect. That is my thing. I'm definitely a diamond in the rough. I'm very rough around the edges. I am not, I'm just messy, and I'm the kind of person that speaks their mind. And I try to do it with integrity, but I don't flinch from having some deep conversations, and it's also challenging conversations. And it's been a blessing in the work that I do on the streets of Chicago and in the work that I do with Nick, but it's also been a really big controversy in relationships, in business, in different things like that, because I basically, when I see something or I feel something, I have to speak about it. And that happens because I have a trauma-informed life, like many, many people. I come from, both sides of my family have addiction issues. My mother and father's, their generation's addictions. And then there's mental illness on my mom's side. And when you have addiction and any kind of mental illness, it has been my experience and many experiences of people that I have served in my life, that you get put in dangerous situations. And so when I was a child, I was put in very dangerous situations, and some, super dark things happened to me when I was young. And what's so interesting is that that is also the same time, though, that Jesus entered my world. And interestingly enough, that I have always felt a calling to be close to God since I was a little tiny girl. And but I was not raised in a religious family, because my mom is when my mom and dad are Catholic, and at the time they got divorced when I was 3, and in the Catholic Church in the 60s, when you're divorced, you're kind of like excommunicated, cut out. And so my dad went on his merry way, but my mom, this like flipped her out. So my brother and sister, I have a brother and sister. My brother is 9 years older than me, and my sister is 13 years older than me. And they were both raised in Catholic schools, the whole Catholic vibe. So maybe I absorbed some Catholicism that way, but it's very interesting that my drive, like I was super hungry to learn. And actually I learned about all kinds of religions, the Baha'i faith, Judaism, and Hinduism, all different faiths. But the person I resonated most with and the deepness of my heart was really with Jesus, his words and his work. And really, I really nut it down to a very, very basic level of, loving your neighbor as yourself, how you want to be treated is the whole kindness piece of it. I don't get very deep into all the scripture, although I do study scripture. In fact, Frank has helped me out when I am confused about something. I'll send him something and he'll send me back an answer. But because I had this trauma-informed life, when this really crazy experience happened to me when I was really little, when I was 6 years old, I was raped by a babysitter. And in that time, weirdly, right after like the event, I escaped. I found a way to escape. And so when I escaped, I went into this like bathroom and I locked myself in. Well, the person that was the bad guy in the story, he knew that my mom was going to come home right away and like come back to the house. And so he was trying to get into the room where I was. And I was, 6. So you're only 6 years old. I'm sorry about that. He's coughing. I'm only 6 years old. And he was pushing against the door. And this is going to be all, you're going to live my whole life right now. Coughing child, deep story. It's all here. So what happened was he was pushing against the door and I was pushing back, but you're 6 years old and he's an adult. Okay. When this is happening. And at that same moment, I realized that something else was pushing against the door with me. And I had wrote about this because I was so amazed that I know that was Jesus pushing against the door. Like there's no one that could tell me any different. There's no one. I know for a fact I'm pushing against the door. There's someone that's dark coming in and the door is totally locked. Locked. So what happened was when my mom came back, she had been drinking with her friend, who's the babysitter's mom. And I couldn't tell her anything because I realized she was drunk. So at 6 years old, my whole life has changed. Now, like I know that adults can't be trusted because they tell you you're going to be in a safe place and you're not. There's people that want to harm you in some way. And I became super skilled at learning about like what people are saying and what their actions are doing. If they do not meet, it triggers something in me that's so crazy. It's amazing. And I know from all the 12-step groups that I've been in that this is not unusual where people who are children of alcoholics or drug addicts. So move forward in my life, I privately was doing like I was looking in the Bible and I would talk to people. I lived in more of a Jewish neighborhood, so I didn't really get to talk about my faith in that way. But eventually I ended up I graduated. Well, here's what happened. My mom, she was threatening me one time with, she was telling me, I'm going to send you to a Catholic school. And because I was a very rowdy kid. And I was getting kicked out of places because I was speaking my mind. And also because whatever tragedy is happening in your household, it comes out with kids in school. So I she decided that she was going to threaten me, but I decided to like trick her. And I went to the nuns at the school and I said, hey, I'm in trouble at school all the time. This is what's happening in my house. I'm a waitress. I was 14 at the time. I was a waitress. I lied about my age so I can get a job. So I was a waitress. I said, I can pay for books, but I can't pay for tuition. Would you let me in? And the nuns, being these Catholic nuns that are like, this is what their whole journey is. They took me in and they gave me a full scholarship. And because of those nuns, I graduated high school in 3 years. And I was the person that wasn't supposed to be, you know, I was the person that was not, most likely not to complete school. I was always in detention. There was always something happening. But it led me to a Catholic college. A Catholic college came, and I also got a full scholarship to this Catholic college. But and in there, that's where I got confirmed and baptized and did all the things, and I did it all on my own because, and I feel like that is a stronger. It's strong. It's like it just means more to me that no one fed me information about God and Jesus like that. I was the seeker, and I learned what I needed to know. And in doing that, eventually though, because I still have a trauma life and I didn't learn the skills to like deal with things, I eventually got kicked out of college. But they asked me back to give a speech though after I became super famous with the Inspiration Cafe. so so but I learned so much from that whole situation that I landed in many different jobs. I worked with people who I worked with the poor. I worked with girls in a group home who were sexually abused, and I was very like I knew their trauma, I knew their pain. And then I moved to help people get off with public aid issues. I helped with social workers, and then eventually I landed to be a Chicago police officer. And this was in 1986, and the Chicago Police Department didn't have community policing at the time. But because of my history with social services before, I would bring that with me to all the jobs that I did on the police department. The thing that happened though with that is the police department wants you to follow a semi-military organization, very much follow the rules. And I had a heart and compassion for people who were poor, because I learned at a very young age, like when my mom and dad were both like in their little party time of their life, they would leave me with different people. Like, so if we would go to a restaurant, I would be left with the cashier. If we went to a big like event, I would be left with the cloak person, the person that hangs your jackets, you know. When my dad would go to business meetings, he would leave me with the car parking attendant, and I would be left with different maids. And it was very interesting. But all those people, all those service-oriented people treated me with so much respect and love. And I was just called to them. And even to this day, when I'm in the hospital with Nick, the people I have the deepest conversations with are the ones that clean the room every day at the hospital. It's the most crazy. I tell them all the time, I'm like, I personally think that you might be angels, because it's like I am just literally having these most deep conversations. And when Nick was in a coma, they're the people that they encouraged me. The maids that would come in, they'd be like, oh honey, don't worry, he's coming back. They would pray over him. They didn't even, they just, they're just the most amazing person, the people. And there's this car parking attendant, his name was Luther. He would carry me on his shoulders when I was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. And he would tell me about life and just about like just people in general. And I that's how I learned. I just like sucked all that information in. And so being in the police department, we would go into jobs where there's domestic issues and poverty and drug addiction always. And so I would do all these crazy things. Like I learned about uh there's a way to like like change a situation when it was really, really like two people were arguing. Okay, so if two people are arguing and they're all into each other's space, and she did it, he did it, everything. And so I would go to my partner. Okay, we're going to do this thing, neuro linguistic programming. I learned this thing. Okay, so I was like, all right, I'm just going to say something, just go with it. He's like, okay. So we would go into these like really heated domestic violence thing, and people would be screaming, and I would go, hey Mark, do you smell gas? And he'd be like, what? I was like, I think I smell gas. Do you smell gas? And the two people would stop and they would look and they're like, what, you smell gas? And one of them would go into the kitchen to look, and boom, we broke the cycle right there, And we would do this all the time, like all different ways. And but eventually there was times where we had to really step in when the police department probably wouldn't. And one particular time is when everything shifted for me. It was there was a family that called. That was a man was shot, and I was the first person to arrive. And I went into the house. And normally, when you're on a shooting scene, everybody's screaming. There's chaos. There's craziness. But this time, I walk up the stairs, and everything's silent, and everybody's like in their own place, except for the man who was shot, and he was screaming, and he was holding between his legs, let's just say, and he was very upset. And so I realized right away that there was something that happened, and that someone did street justice basically, and that's really what happened. So what happened was a family member walked in on this man sexually abusing a child. They took out a gun, they shot him in his lower nether regions, and then they just wanted him out. And which was fine. I mean, that's what we were going to do, but no one told me that whole story. I just intuited that story. But I went to the matriarch of the family and I said to her, listen, this is what I feel happened. And I said the same thing. You walked in on sexual abuse, someone shot this person. I said, and I know that no one's going to sign an arrest paper. No one's gonna arrest. There's no one that's gonna leave this house today. I know it. And she said, yeah, you could be right. And I was like, yeah, well, I have these 5 resources for you. And I want you to know that there's this domestic violence shelter. There is a counselor that deals with sexual abuse. This is where you can take your children. And I gave her all the information. And then we just wrote up paperwork that was pretty general. And the perpetrator went to the hospital. And but when this happened, because it was a shooting, one of my supervisors arrived on the scene, and he saw what was going on. And after I got done with that job, he called me into the office. And when I got called into the office, he basically just reamed me a new, you know what, and he just was saying, like, you're not a effing social worker, you're a police officer, you can't work with these people like that. Better, we could get in so much trouble. And I realized, oh, here it comes. This is something I learned from childhood. You have more power, you have more education, you have more money, you think you are more valuable. And I was like, no, this is not going to happen. So I was like, hey, Sarge, I understand what you're saying, but like, this is, who I am, blah, blah. And he's like, well, one day you're going to pay for it. And this happened many times to me in many different situations. And eventually it came to a point where my partner and I were on a job, and maybe a couple hours before, there were some other police officers that wanted us to put them on paper. It means that you would just write that they were on the job that you were at. So they would get like points for it. They would get recognition for it from your supervisors. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to put you down on a job when I have to go to court and talk to a judge, and I'm just not going to do it. And so they said, well, if you don't play, you're going to pay. And I was just like, well, okay, like whatever. And by then I was already kind of cocky because I was already doing my community work within the police department. But eventually we were on a job where it was we were in a car chase, and the driver of the stolen car jumped out. And today police officers have these like cool little body cams and everything, but we had a radio that was hooked up here, and it was like this big, and it was hooked on your belt. And so when the guy jumped out of, first of all, you always arrest the driver of a car. That's like the way you win in court. So the minute the driver jumped out, my partner Mark went after him, and he jumped over a fence. And when he jumped over a fence, the radio got caught on the fence. So Mark was running after this perpetrator without his radio, without any any way to communicate to me. So I was calling in for help. And as I was calling for help, I was telling where he was. And I was super scared because the guy had a really long jacket, and all I could think of was like he was hiding a gun, because it was a super long jacket. And anyways, bottom line was no one showed up. And eventually Mark came out this other place, and I was like, I was really upset. And when I finally saw Mark, I was like, thank God. So I called in and said, okay, everything's okay. I found my partner, blah, blah, blah. And then cars started showing up. Police cars started showing up. And then I said, are you kidding me? Like, you all were around this whole time, that you would put someone's life in danger because you don't like how I am in in our community, because I am a social worker, because, I'm, trying to help people. Like, it was unbelievable. And that moment, I knew that I was going to do something different. At that time, I was also dating, and just got married to a police officer. And I sat down with Perry, my husband, and I said, hey, listen, I feel like, first of all, I'm putting my partner in danger every day because of my actions. And I'm not really sure how long I would last without getting in huge trouble in the police department. So the bottom line is, I said I wanted to do something else. And this is before, we had computers. So I used to read the paper all the time. And anytime I read a story that was really uplifting or really positive, I loved them. I would cut them out and put them in a drawer. And I had read a story about a cafe in Atlanta, Georgia called Cafe 458, which treated the homeless with dignity and respect. And I told my husband, I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to take a leave of absence, because he's like super even keeled, super intelligent dude. I knew on the police department, he never is in trouble. He's the best police officer that you could have. And so he was just like, yeah, like, do it. So I took a leave of absence, and I said to him, I want to go to this restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was like, okay, let's go. So we drove to Atlanta, Georgia. I called them, and we drove to Cafe 458. And it was the most remarkable place, because there was a regular restaurant. You got to choose your meals off a menu. Everybody was super friendly. And the guy that founded the cafe in Atlanta knew that I was an extrovert and my husband was an introvert. And so he put me in the back of the kitchen, and he put my husband on the floor. And it was the best thing he could ever done, because there was a hole in the wall, like a port, like in a ship. There was a hole in the wall, and I was washing dishes, and I was watching my husband Perry, and we brought his little brother Corey. They were both servers on the floor that day, and my husband, who never talks to people, was totally engaged, talking about sports, talking about, like life, just talking about everyday things, absolutely connecting. And I realized this was magic. Like this was all magic. And with that, um, literally like 2 days later, we got back in the car to go back to Chicago. And I said, I am so inspired. And Perry looked at me, he's like, Inspiration Cafe. And I was like, yes, that is the name of the cafe. I want to do it. And so we come back to Chicago, and because I don't have a degree, I did at that time, I didn't have a degree in anything. And I was, a former police officer. I didn't know where anything, I just didn't know anything. I just was like, all right, where am I going to do it? What I did learn from Cafe 458 was that they were near all train stations, places they could, like, where the homeless like were sleeping at night, any shelters. They made themselves in the center where anybody could walk to. So I looked up in Chicago where the most homeless people were, and it was in Uptown in Chicago. And so when you read stories about me in the paper about how the cafe gets started, they always change the story to make it sound better. And they make it sound like I was a police officer, I saw poverty, and I wanted to change the world that way. And that's where I wanted to start the cafe. And that is completely untrue. I wanted to start the restaurant in a place where there was a lot of homeless people, but really I was creating a place where it was an even playing field for people. So people who had less can mingle with people who had more. But what's going to happen is that they're going to find a common denominator. They're going to find a common place. So anybody in the chairs could have been the prostitutes from Genesis House, where we were just talking about. It could be elderly from Little Brothers of the Poor. It could have been people who have HIV/AIDS in the seats like that. It does not make a difference, because basically what's happening is I just wanted to create a situation where I didn't want to see like, oh, I have, I have more than you, and so I have more power. And the thing about this was so deep in me, and it was coming from this really deep place. Now, the thing about this is that I always thought it was God that was moving me so fiercely to make this cafe happen. And it is true, God was with me the whole time. Jesus was my, right-hand person, because I couldn't have done it without the church that I was going to at the time. But it was really trauma, the trauma of my childhood, of being always put in a situation where people who had more power and more money and thought they were more fabulous, and they were putting me in really unsafe situations. I was always cleaning up for people who were adults that they should have cleaned up for themselves. And so that anger, that fierce rage, was the thing that fueled me. And no one could stop me from creating the Inspiration Cafe. There was no one. And the reason why I say that is because first of all, I went to Uptown and I found the place that I was going to be. And I started talking to people, and no one wanted me around there at all. They're just like, she's just some girl that has like these big dreams. And, they weren't listening to me at all. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to show you that I'm very committed. And so I took my nephew's red radio flyer wagon, and I had a friend who owned a restaurant supply business, and I got this catering equipment that kept everything warm. And I made sandwiches, and at the time I had really good coffee, but the really good coffee was only Dunkin' Donuts, because it's not like all the fancy coffees that you have now. But it was really good coffee, because shelter coffee always was watered down because you want to make it stretch and the whole thing. So I wanted to be like the best thing that you could have. And we just loaded it up, and I took a couple of my friends, and we went on the streets of Uptown, and we started just handing out coffees and sandwiches. And right away, people were like, what do we have to do to get this? The homeless were very suspicious. And I said, nothing. There's nothing you need to do. I just wanted to share this with you, and I wanted, to just treat you the way that, I want to be treated. And so we became fast friends quickly, the homeless on the street. And then I became very popular. Then I got my car and I put more catering equipment in it. And then I started serving people. And I always serve people like these very extravagant breakfast things. Like we've had eggs Benedict with holiday sauce right on the street. We've had French toast with like different like layers of compote. We've had like fresh baked scones and croissant and the best coffee. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And it was the connection of just talking, literally just talking about everyday things that really was the fuel. And then I got a school bus and I took all the seats out of the school bus and made it a mobile cafe. And when that happened, there was a person in the uptown area. They were like, okay, this girl's really, she's an overachiever. She is not leaving. And so they called a local television station to come out. And this man, he's a reporter, his name was Burley Hines. And he came out and did a story about me in the bus. And the minute that happened, there was a man that saw the story and was like, that girl came and asked me to rent a space. And I said, no, I'm going to call her. So he calls me up and he's like, hey, I just saw you on the news. I'm really sorry I didn't rent that space to you. I really would love to rent you the space now. I can give you 6 months free rent. And then it's going to be $800 a month. And I was like, sold, I'm doing it. So on my 30th birthday, I went and signed this lease. Now, the reason why I said that no one could stop me is because nobody knew, not even my husband, that I did this. Okay. And this is the part where people are like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was driven by something completely like I just don't even know how to explain it. Like I would just pop up at 5 a.m, get right to it. I would, when we opened the doors of the Inspiration Cafe, I had nothing. Okay. So I went to my church and I said, I have nothing. I need tables and chairs. All the people in my church, they brought me tables and chairs. And how the Inspiration Cafe started was with a Mr. Coffee maker, a wok, and a toaster. That is all I had. And then I read this book that's called How to Start Your Own Volunteer Organization by Joan Flanagan. And I read it cover to cover, and I read it twice. And I just literally followed the book. Get a board of directors. You just need 3 people. So I was like, okay, just got 3 people that I knew and got my 501c3, took a sanitation class. And the God part comes in this story where all the doors start flying open, right? Boom, 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 boom. But how God works with me in my life, he totally prepares me. But it's always this white knuckle, very down and dirty, pushing through all the stuff that you have to do. So I would always end up having money for rent, but I would have like everything, and then I would have $1 left. You know what I mean? It was like not like I wouldn't have like abundance like that in that kind of way, but I would have abundance in completely different ways. And this is how I know how God works, right? So what happens is that the cafe opens, and I took my sanitation class. This plumber came, and I was just getting this. I got this restaurant stove donated to me, and they said you need a hood, like a safety hood, a ventilation hood. But because I don't know what I'm doing, I'm in a 10-story building. You can't just like make the vent has to go up 10 stories. Okay, so I was like, oh, like I had no idea. Like we were venting out, like we would do just like if you were in a trailer park and you had like the little rubber hose and you just vent it out, you know what I mean? Like that. We were doing everything just the wrong way, but we were still serving people. Okay. And the thing about it is when I first started the Inspiration Cafe, I wanted to serve families, women, and children. And the very first day I opened, there was like 3 women that came. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this can't be like. Then the next day, 4 women came. And I was like, I know for a fact there's women and children, and these women who are homeless sat me down and were like, okay, here's the deal. We have these shelters that we stay at where we are very well taken care of, but there's a ton of single people out there that do not have everything. And this is just something what Nancy had said. She's like, we, and in Uptown, there was mostly it was single adult males. And so I was like, okay, like if you, they said, we will go out and tell them that you are willing to open the doors to them. And I was like, okay, if I'm willing, you're willing, let's go. So that next day, the cafe was full. There was 40 people, boom. And I was serving this, like I said, with a toaster, a wok, and a Mr. Coffee maker. But they didn't care. They were just so happy to be in a place that was, I made a little library. It was all the tables and chairs were mixed match, but they were like, it was perfect. It was very homey. It was warm. And so we were all like, I don't know, it's just like you were in my house, basically, was happening. Eventually the city, they heard about me because Studs Terkel, who Frank Lott had talked about, Studs Terkel had me on his radio show. And then the city came and they wanted to present me with a check, which was really awesome. And so we had this like very big event. There was local artists and theater people, and they were serving, and it was very like a very wonderful thing. But when the city came into to like, there was cameras. Do you remember this, Frank? The story? There's cameras, and it was a hoo-ha. Like it was a big deal. And I was never been on TV or anything. I was being interviewed and everything. And the director of human services of the city of Chicago tapped me on the shoulder and brought me into the back room. And she's like, do you know that everything here is illegal? And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, you don't have the proper ventilation hood. You don't have the proper, like she went through this whole list. And so she's like, the ventilation hood alone is $10,000. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And she turns around and gives me a check for $10,000. And I was like, wow, okay, this is unbelievable. This is God working in the most remarkable ways. And the thing about it is that at that time we would have so much food donated to us that we would stack it in the cafes, but all these other places didn't have the same amount of food. And so I didn't want to turn away stuff because I didn't know like when we would get another donation. So we gathered up all the food, all the guests of the cafe would come with me, volunteers would come with me. We would just distribute food, and we would call it the ditch, doorbell ditching, because what we would do is we would know families that really needed food. We would make these big boxes of food. We would go to their places. We would ring the doorbell. We would leave the food. We would go down. We would watch to see like they would get it. And it was like, we were like children, like the most happiest children, giddy. It was so remarkable, so wonderful. It was amazing. And that is what happened all the time. There's a story that I love to tell, because when people tell me like, well, how would you know that, like God is working in your life? And this is a story that I always talk about with Frank. Frank was a board member, Frank Lott was a board member. And we were at a board meeting, and at this time at the board meetings, we basically were writing checks out of our own pockets. Like that is how we kept the cafe afloat, because I didn't know like your board of directors should be people from all different walks of life that could raise money for you. I had no idea. I was just this girl who wanted to do this crazy experiment that I really felt called to do. And it was just working. And so the president of the board, her name was Lisa Madigan, who was a very powerful person in Chicago. But she comes from a very long line of politicians. Lisa Madigan ended up to be the Attorney General of Illinois for a long time. But before she was the Attorney General, she was just my pal, my friend, and friend of the cafe. But she's trained because of her family history and all the politics and the way that she's trained in Robert's Rules of Order, what you're supposed to do on board meetings, and all the things you're supposed to do right. I would drive her crazy. She's just like, how is this even ever, like, how is this existing? Like, how could this even be existing, the cafe? Because you are doing nothing that is written, you know what I mean? Like, except for just the little bits that I learned in my volunteer organization thing. Volunteers would still come. They would see me on the street. They'd still come in. So I had all volunteers. We were all volunteer organization. There was no paid staff at the time. So she said to me, we're going to have to close because there's nothing we can do. We tried all these different like fundraisers. We were still doing like chili cook-offs and, like pancake breakfast, all the little things that you would do in like church related fundraising. And she's like, there's nothing. And so I turned to Frank and I was like, we need to pray about this. And Frank said, yeah, let's do this. And Lisa, who is not from this world at all, she was just like, are you guys serious right now? And I was like, yeah, we're very serious. So Frank grabbed my hands. I looked at Frank. We pray. We do this whole thing. Everybody else is quiet. The rest of the board's just like, they thought we were loony birds. And I was just like, we just have to trust because I don't know how this is going to turn out. And a week later, an unsolicited $20,000 check arrived at the cafe. And I was like, boom, I called Lisa and I said, Lisa, God is with us. And she said, no, that was pure luck. That's luck. Luck is with you. And so I am so grateful that I had that opportunity to serve people. And the way I learned how to, I don't know, I learned how to see people from a different point of view from my life history of the trauma that I had in my life. There's certain people in life that take trauma and turn it into something that they could use. And there's other people that take trauma and become very buried with it. And I'm very thankful that I am the one that turns it around and uses it as a fuel that I could use. So the Inspiration Cafe is 30 years old now. It is run by a whole other team. They have housing now, and we have more than one restaurant. The public gets to eat at the restaurants too now. We have one restaurant that's just for the public, and we have one restaurant that's for the homeless. And we have housing on the south side of Chicago. And it's a very, very successful, unbelievable place. I had left the Inspiration Cafe when I had gotten pregnant with my twins, Emily and Nick. And I stayed at the cafe until they were 2. And so I raised my children at the cafe, and I would have kept raising them there because I didn't know better again. When my pediatrician, when they were 2 years old, said that he saw me in a magazine, I was in Maribel magazine, and it was in his office. And he saw me in the magazine and he said, hey, are you still at the Inspiration Cafe? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what do you do with Emily and Nicholas? And I was like, they come with me every day to the cafe. Like, everybody is with them. And he said, are the homeless near the kids at the cafe? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, that's who's raising my kids, the homeless guests of the cafe. They're the ones that are holding them, like I would be breastfeeding, but like they like when they were little, that would be breastfeeding and they would be doing their thing. And like, it was just like it was like a bunch of parents in the cafe. And even when I was found out that I was pregnant, the guests of the cafe knew that I was pregnant before Perry, because I was sick. And the doctor had told me you should go get a pregnancy test. And so I was still at the cafe, and I went to the bathroom and I went and, did the old pee on the stick thing. And outside the door of the bathroom were three of the homeless guests pacing like they were their own fathers. And I came out and it was positive, and I was like, oh my God, it's positive. And they went crazy because they missed their kids, they missed their families. They just were like, it was it was remarkable. When I was very pregnant, they would carry all my stuff. They would take care of me. Everybody was a big community in that way. And eventually the pediatrician told me that there's such a high incidence of tuberculosis in the homeless population at that time, and that the kids were really in jeopardy. And I was so mortified because I thought I was putting my children in harm's way by bringing them to the cafe the whole time. So eventually we had to hire people at the Inspiration Cafe. So we hired staff, and the cafe, each person that took over the cafe has been remarkable. They put their own stamp on it. They have their own like feeling of how things should be run, and it's never been an easy. There's been headbutting with me and everything, but eventually I've done work I was a massage therapist while I was doing the Inspiration Cafe, because that was the way that I made my own money. And so I did a lot of serving the community that way, and a lot of healing work within the massage therapy community and working with people that way. And then coming up to now, because I know my time is coming short. Coming up to now, in 2015, my son Nick, who was 23 years old, had a heart attack at home because he had the West Nile virus and pneumonia, but didn't know that he had those things. He was just feeling poorly, and there was really no warning or anything. And I thank God I was home, and I did CPR on him, and my husband was home too. So we were doing CPR, both of us, on Nick. But the virus that he had mimics oxygen in your blood. So even though we were doing CPR and blood was getting to his brain, it wasn't fully oxygenated. And so he received something called an anoxic brain injury, which is different than a traumatic brain injury. An anoxic brain injury is where parts of your brain die and never to return. So the neurons have to go around the dead areas of the brain now to find any fluid neural pathways. So he became fully disabled, nonverbal, and he was supposed to not make it. And of course he does. And when he does make it, this is another time where I had lots of conversations with God about this. Because like, what is healing really, right? And so I was thinking about the same paths that I was taking when I served the homeless, when I was a police officer serving the poor in the worst places in Chicago, and serving Nick now. The theme is always, the world lowers the bar for people who are different. Okay, so if you are disabled, if you are not of the same race, if you have, like if you're lower income, like the bar comes down. Like somehow the public like lowers the bar, and they don't want you to work to raise it. It's a crazy thing. And so, there was a lot of people telling me that I should let Nick go. And I said, like, if Nick wants to go, he would go. Like, he's off the machines. He was off the machines. If he wanted to go, he would go. But he chose to stay. So he chose to stay. And because he chose to stay, one of the most amazing things, because he's nonverbal, and we have these insanely deep conversations on the most spiritual level that I cannot even describe. And the thing about it is that it's about your soul. Like God, like you were born as this most remarkable, beautiful, just gift to the world. Every single person, even the nastiest people. All right. They are remarkable. They were born this way. What happens after with all the things that get layered on by the world, that is, like, that's the thing that people see. We only see the crap that happens. But if we really concentrated, because what Nick shows me every day is that, yeah, his body is not the same, for sure. He's twisted. He's in, he can't talk. He's coughing. He makes public, noises, the whole thing. But he is Nicholas. He is the same child I gave birth, like the exact same. There's ways that tells me the things he needs, and I could just see his purity. When he's in a room with people, he's like magically beaming goodness. And I've said, I've taken meditation courses and yoga and meditation, and I've said, if I was going to teach meditation again, which I really want to do, I actually want Nick to be with me as my co-teacher. And I did it for a short time with a brain injury organization, because I feel like our words and our drama and all the things take away from the remarkable beauty of our essence. And that is what I saw in the homeless when I was serving, the people who didn't have homes. That's what I saw when I was on the street. That's what I saw with the most mentally ill schizophrenic person. Literally, they'd be like in 5 different voices in their head and doing this. But there's like, for 1 second, like a little glimpse of their just goodness. God's goodness is there. God has prepared me through my whole life for this work that I'm doing right now. This work that I'm doing right now, hardest work ever, not because it's physically hard. It is physically hard like that, but it's more that I always have to advocate for Nick, like in the way that I have to really prove that he's worthy. And I'm like, why would you, like, he's worthy because he's human. He's, the seniors that get put out of places, because they're old now, it's like, they're human, they're still worthy. Everybody's still worthy. Okay. And the fight that I have to go through, the research that I have to do with his injury, all the things that happen is only because the fuel that God has given me. And this is the season of Advent. And this week in my Advent work that I've been doing, it's the week of hope with Mary. And just thinking, and I pray to Mary all the time, because I think, oh my God, like, she gave birth to Jesus, and he is God. Like, he's going to be God. His life is going to end in this very tragic way. Okay. She's going to see it as tragic. He does not see it as tragic, though. Jesus does not see it as tragic, because he has this inner knowing that it's not even about like, I'm going to die for you and you're going to be free of your sins. No, he has an inner knowing. This is my own personal opinion. He has an inner knowing that the essence of goodness, that is the light within you, is never going away. It is fuel. It is light. The darkest place there can be, it's the tiniest bit of light makes the most hopeful. There's the most hope that comes from it. I just know it. I feel like, okay, Mary, just give me the strength. I just need to know. I just need to get through this thing, talk to this person who doesn't believe in anything that I'm saying. I just got to get through this thing. This is how God's worked in my whole life. Like, no matter what it is, it's just crazy. Now, the part that I'm always working with, and I was telling Tina this the other day, is that I'm in counseling again, and I'm doing trauma-informed counseling. It's called interfamily systems. And I'm working through a lot of stuff that I thought I worked through before. But what I realized, and I'm going to end it here, and then you guys can ask me questions. What I realized last year was I heard a podcast of this woman who said when she was arguing with someone one time, she decided to change the situation, the dynamic. And she said that during an argument in her body, she said to herself, who is arguing with this person right now? Like what part of me is arguing with this person right now? And she found out that it was really because of something that happened to her way back, that she felt like it was happening again, different situation, but she felt that way and she was going to go after it. So I was like, I'm going to try to do that, because I don't argue, but I get like ticked off about certain things. And so I'm like, where does that negative feeling come from? And so I started doing it and I realized, oh man, like all of it, like even when someone says, you should give up on Nick, you should put Nick in a nursing home. And I'm like, okay, fierce rage comes through me. And I'll be really polite to you. I'll say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. This is what I've learned about nursing homes, and I'll give them all the facts and everything. But in my body, there is fire happening. And then I realized, oh, this is because I was not advocated for. My adult people around me, didn't fight for me. And it still lays in there. It's still in there. So that's the wound that needs to be healed. And so that's what I'm working with right now. But that's another time where I'm always with God's essence. And my counselor always says to me, I'll say, oh, I think I did really well. I answered back to this person like this. And she's like, but what were you feeling when you were answering in that correct way? And I was like, I was still feeling like rage. Like, she's like, well, that's not even God's heart. Like your compassionate heart is not even there. Like what you just did was polite, I guess, but it really wasn't of God. Like your spirit, that light that I talk about that's in Nick and in all of us, we have to be able to tap into that pure essence to come to every situation. And that is what I'm working with right now, because that's wow, that's really, really hard. And I don't know what that looks like. Like last night when the counselor said, well, what does a compassionate answer to that person look like? And I was like, I really freaking don't know. Like I know what it's supposed to be on paper, but the feeling, I haven't gotten there yet. So I'm very humble, and hopefully you found the thread in my conversation. Okay. And with that, I am done.
Well, Lisa, we kind of thank you, because this was